Hello, good morning. Welcome to PsychCandy for Tuesday, May 24th. Mark, good to see you down there. Hope your week is going well, everybody. Everybody watching out in YouTube land, welcome. And before I get started today, kind of wanted to mention to you guys the PsychCandy Empowerment Bootcamp has officially been set for July 29th through the 31st. I encourage you to please go over to the website, check that out. We're going to have some great speakers, some really special stuff going on for Friday through Sunday. So I encourage you not to miss that. You can go to psychcandy.org and then click on events, and you'll be able to go and see all the details there. So definitely invite you to do that. Today, this topic has, it's been my focal point for the last, really for the last week, but this weekend is really present because I found myself sitting a couple of times. I scroll through a few groups on Facebook and what have you, and there are so many memes that joke around about our communication. There's sad memes, happy memes, funny memes, all this stuff talking about how do we talk. I saw one yesterday that was, you're you're alone because you don't speak up. You like somebody, you don't tell them. You assume. We assume feelings. We assume emotion. We assume an intent from somebody. We can't assume. We have to speak. We don't walk around, reading everybody's mind, being able to tell exactly what everybody is thinking. It just doesn't work that way, right? So we have to become attuned to how do we communicate. Look, I can't even tell you how many times a day I text. Now, in a lot of situations, that's fine. I mean, we all can admit that we enjoy the text every now and then. You're not having to deal with the phone call. You're not dealing with face to face. You're dealing with a simple text message. The problem with the text message is that it leaves that space, it leaves that room for people to assume or create a tone to your message, especially if it's somebody that you know. Now, most of my close friends, I can text because we've spent so much time together in person. A lot of times, they've gathered a pretty good understanding of me. They know how I talk. They know what my inflections are. They know what my body language is sometimes when I'm expressing something and all of that. But whenever you take that dynamic, though, to somebody that's newer in your life, a work colleague even, or something like that, well, in our own brain, we're thinking that the recipient of our message is going to just automatically know what we mean. That's not always the case. When it comes to like emails and text and all this kind of thing, well, that's become our default mode of communication for most people. It's quick, efficient, and we don't have to engage in live, real-time emotional responses to that message, right? For some, that's a very splendid, lovely isolation from the immediate emotional reactions, that can be uncomfortable or comfortable for some, that isolation meaning. But it eliminates the most valuable information of any conversation. Like in face-to-face communication, we rely heavily on nonverbal information like facial expression, body posture, gestures, voice tone. And we use that to interpret and predict other people's behavior. But you got to remember, everybody's doing that to you too. So without these important nonverbal cues, then our imagination is left to fill in the blanks of what the person that's sending us the message really intend and how they felt about the communication. We really fill in those blanks, though, with positive intentions. And this can lead to that misunderstanding, damaged relationships, and just poor decisions sometimes. And given that many of us, must communicate via email and text and so forth, we have to be aware that the fact that our electronic communication can have a tone We got to keep this in mind. People will remember the emotional tone of any email or text more vividly and longer than the content. And that's true. You know, that tone is conveyed through word choice, syntax, punctuation, letter case, sentence length, the opening and closing. And then there's other like graphic indicators, like because everybody uses emojis, emoticons, all these kind of things. So here's something to consider. So just because you write in a certain way doesn't mean it's received that same way. So in a conversation, there is physical climate and there's also psychological climate. So when you're in the same place as somebody, with the person that you're speaking, well, now you're sharing the same physical climate and you know, you're in the same physical space, pretty much experiencing the same environment during that conversation. However, you can share the same physical climate with a person, but be in very different psychological climates during that space. Whereas how we communicate in our tones and what we see in somebody else makes a very big difference on what we're going to walk away with from that conversation. Now, your life might be fairly stress free at the moment, but the person you're talking to, may be operating with tight deadlines or heavy stress, a host of personal problems. But when you're in the same space, you're more likely to recognize and respond to the psychological climate of the person as compared to when you can't see or hear them. Because then we're left in that space that I was talking about of assumption. So now we're going to assume what they mean. We're going to create that tone. We're going to create that dynamic because that's what our brains do. So when you compose your message, when you compose that text, recognizing that the receiver may not be in the same mood or emotional state as you, that's important. So try to imagine how the person receiving your message could interpret it. Now, sometimes I'm in a rush, and I don't always do this, but I try to just to glance back over, and I want to read again really quick what I'm about to send. And I've often had to go back and correct something, edit something, change a word, something like that, because when I reread it in my own head, I do flip it around and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, that might sound harsh, or that might come across as vague, or it might, all of these things. We want to take the time sometimes to do that because, one, it helps us better learn how to craft our message so that we're thinking of the receiver. When we read an email or a text, we attempt to read intention and tone into the words. If a message is ambiguous, well, many people will just automatically read the most negative emotions and intentions into it. Have you ever made your inferences about a person not responding to an email or a text, that you've sent? Well, is your first thought that the person just doesn't think your message was important, or they're trying to just avoid the issue, altogether? So here's what I want to share. I'm going to share with you a couple of possible tone interpretations. Okay, so listen to this. So first one is, well, if you don't get that to me by 1 p.m. today, we're going to miss our deadline. Right? Well, the tone interpretation of that could be, hey, dummy, we're going to miss a deadline and it's your fault. We can flip things because we're going to change that tone and direction sometimes. Now, what could have been written was, hey, today's 1 p.m. deadline is really critical. So it's very important that I get your feedback today so that we can deliver to you on schedule. Thanks for your help. Now, see, there's a big difference there, but you're conveying the same goal in your message. Next example might be, that's not what we agreed to in our meeting. Well, the tone interpretation of that could be, I know you weren't paying attention and you're trying to pull something over on me, so let's, let me set this straight. We assume sort of, we almost take that combative approach. Now, what could have been said in that was, in taking a look at my notes, I've come to a different conclusion, Would you have a few minutes for us to talk on the phone and figure this out today? Thanks. Well, two very different aspects, right? But wording and our choice of wording is so critically important. Next example. Now, I get this a lot. Now, I kind of lump this into the same category as just the letter K. K. Or somebody responds back with, "Yup." Well, our brains can take that, man. Oh, they're being sarcastic, or they're in a mood, or there's a tone there, a yup. Well, that tone interpretation could be, "I'm really busy. I don't have time for you. And by the way, you're not even worthy of a capital Y." so, we take that in, right? We take that in and we start to try to interpret somebody's short answer. I saw a meme once and I saved it because sometimes I use it because I can't. It's just one of my weird peeves is I don't like getting just a letter K back. And the meme I saw was K is the shortest version of fuck you. And so sometimes I have sent that meme to people when they send me just a K. And they'll laugh and do all that stuff. But you know what? Most of those people, they will change their responses in the future. And I at least get an okay. Okay, all right. Instead of just K. But see, our brains do that though. We interpret. Now, when I'm getting a K from somebody, it doesn't mean that that's what they're sitting and thinking. It doesn't even mean that that's their tone. But it means that's what my brain's doing with it. And because we are so engrossed in that electronic communication, we are so engrossed in that sometimes, even if it's somebody new and we're texting a message, we just automatically assume they're going to know what we mean and how we mean it and what our tone is and what our direction is. That's just not the way it works. Because our brains, then, we have become experts at filling in those blanks, haven't we? We become experts at putting in what the tone is. We decide what the other person meant without even clarifying. We don't need to clarify. This is what they said. But in our brain, we just took it and maybe put a negative spin on what they said. We put a negative tone on what they said, whenever that's not even what they meant. I have sent plenty of text messages that people took me wrong. They misunderstood where I was coming from, and they start almost arguing with me. I'm like, whoa, wait, hold up a second. And that's the time that I stop texting right then and there and give them a phone call. And then all of a sudden they hear my tone. Oh, I thought you meant, oh, I thought this. Yeah, I know. You thought, you assumed, and you responded to your own assumption. You reacted to that assumption without clarifying or understanding what the true nature or tone of the message was. That's where we fail. That's where we start failing in our communication. So to convey your intended emotional tone, I'm going to share some tips with you. And number one is assess your relationship with the receiver. And you want to adjust your level of writing formality to match that relationship. So in other words, if I'm texting my best friend, it's going to be different than if I'm texting a patient or texting a work colleague. There's going to be two totally different styles of how I write, right? And email and text is more than just the transmission of information. It's about managing a relationship remotely. Consider leading with a social comment like you would if you were talking face to face. So, for example, hey, I hope you enjoyed the long weekend, or I'm looking forward to working with you on this project. Next thing is that if you think that there's room for misinterpretation of your message, well, take the time to craft to make sure your message is more likely to be received with your true intention. Now that might mean you have to do a little bit of a longer text, maybe. You might have to do a little bit longer of an email, but that's okay because you're taking the time to pay attention to what it is you're about to send to somebody, opposed to just being in a rush and send it out, and you're about to get 20 questions back because you were vague or you're ambiguous, or there might have been the interpretation of a tone, or there might, all these different things. Just take that minute, take that few seconds to just maybe sometimes reread. And I know we're in a hurry. Sometimes we can't always do that. But if you start making that a practice, I promise you, one, Instead of creating an environment where you're going to have 20 texts back and forth, if you took the time to pay attention to what you're sending, you probably just cut 20 texts down to maybe 5 or 6. Well, that saves time, doesn't it? And let me tell you, I would much rather have 5 or 6 than I would like to have, you know, a ton. We also want to, try not to use, text speech like LOL and BTW unless you really know the person really well. Same goes for using emoticons, and emojis and all this stuff. Be careful with your CCs and your BCCs, as different interpretations can be made about what copying people on that message implies. Realize that a person who is maybe blind copied may reply forgetting that they were a blind copy. Things of this nature. I've seen that get a lot of people into trouble. Most people know by now that typing in all caps is considered screaming at someone. Now, I laugh at this because my dad, bless his heart, he's 80, he's 81 years old, okay? And he uses all caps for like every single thing I can't get a text message from him unless it's in all caps, He types everything in all caps. And from his perspective, well, I can see it better. Okay. Well, other people don't always perceive that, would they? Like, dude, stop using all caps, And we have the overuse sometimes of punctuation. Hey, Wendy, I really liked your show. 6 exclamation points. Big-eyed emoji. Smiley face. Smiley face with sunglasses. Sometimes that punctuation can be taken in a much different way. If you're not sure about the tone of an email or a text that you're sending, well, maybe sometimes, especially if it's work related, maybe have someone else read it, give you some feedback before you send it, especially if it's really important. Take the time just to reread something. I was saying this at the beginning of the show. I'm sometimes I'm not able to do this, but I try to really look before I send something. Just glance back over it, make sure things are right. I've had to go back in and adjust wording before because in my brain when I reread it, I was like, oh, well, that sounds a little bit harsh, or that's a little bit vague, And then I'll add in a little extra details, or I'll change a word here and there to make it come. It's nicer, it's more professional. But with just taking that time can make all the difference in the world and save you a lot of heartache and grief. I can promise you. More importantly, know when to pick up the phone or meet face to face to discuss an issue. Listen, if you're dealing with something really, important, know the difference between this is text worthy or this is phone call worthy. Now, I've been in personal relationships where people bring up the most deep, intense, like topics. I'm upset with you, blah 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 blah. You say, or whatever, or just something that's just really important. I gotta go into the hospital and tomorrow morning for major surgery and blah. And it's like, dude, pick the phone up, call me up and have that conversation. One, it shows respect. It shows little respect if you are going to approach that a text message is worthy of something that is, one, if you're discussing or dealing with a relationship with somebody, the breakup text. How many have gotten the breakup text? Those are the modes that I can't go. I just can't even handle it. Like if I get an or a deep personal text from somebody, I don't respond back with text. I pick up the phone and call. But it's amazing to me how many people don't have that practice. They'll continue. Have you had that text log that goes like you could scroll. You get the books. Dude, you could have called me and said all this in 3 minutes instead of the 30 minutes that we've been going back and forth on text. That's my point. So we start, because we think that we're saving ourselves something. What are you doing? You're saving yourself an argument? Are you saving yourself some emotional space? Are you what you and you're not. What you're doing is you're creating, as you're writing those books and books and books and sending that out, you are creating the environment for there to be confusion, assumption, misunderstandings left and right. I mean, those kind of things. Why do that? We have to speak, and we got to speak up. Sometimes, I'm sure most people anyway have thought about, man, what would it be like if you could just read minds? And then you got to ask yourself, would you really want to? Would you want to walk around all the time, like all the time, and you immediately can hear and read everybody's mind? That would leave very little room for people to be uniquely true and rise above, wouldn't it? And could create a very odd, weird situation. But since we're not mind readers, it means that we have to be conscious that we speak up. If you don't speak up and share your feeling or your concern, or even just sharing happiness, well, you can't just assume that everybody else just knows what it is you're feeling or thinking in a particular moment. I posted a meme that I thought was really clever and good on, posted yesterday or something. But anybody said this, it said, if she loved me, she'll text me. That's what he thought. And then she thought the exact same thing. The end. If you think about that, that's how we operate sometimes. Well, if they really cared about me, they would have already called by now. And they're thinking the exact same thing. And then what happens? Nothing. Assumption happens. We form all these things, and that's not what we should do to operate. We got to talk. We got to share. And sometimes we don't do that because we're in fear that us commenting what it is we want to comment is going to be taken a certain way. I'm going to open up a door to some emotional shit here. Oh man, this is going to start an argument. I just know it is. I'm not going to say a word. Well, sometimes that's smart, but it depends on the situation. Walking around being quiet, well, that's not going to help you, and it's not going to make people understand you any better. It's going to make people assume. The importance of good communication skills cannot be overstated, because communication is key to any relationship, whether it be at work or your personal life. And equipping yourself with strong communication skills is one of the most valuable things that you can do for yourself, and can vastly, vastly enrich your social interaction. Working on improving your communication skills is a journey. And simply because with it, you're opening new social horizons. And so how do we improve that? How do we improve our communication skills and ensuring that we speak to the world with clarity and confidence? The very first thing, the most important thing that you can do is listen. We have to listen. Listening is really the single most important factor in becoming a clear and confident communicator. This is a key communication skill and something that so few are experts at. Sometimes we jump into something because, well, we got to get our point across. We got to say what we need to say, or we'll cut somebody off in a conversation because, well, we already know. I know where you're going, and blah 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 blah. No, you didn't let them finish, so we jumped the gun. Actually, listening to people's words, to their nuances of intonation, hints of emotion, means that you are much more likely to understand where they're coming from and what it is they're trying to tell you. And we need to do that sometimes. Sometimes we got to shut up and listen. Let them finish, and then we can comment back. On top of this, a focused engagement in this way is good for social understanding and the development of tolerance. So if you find yourself in a conversation in which you've stopped listening and you're just kind of waiting for a break in the noise in order to speak, then stop and rethink your priorities. Actively listening and engaging fully in the conversation is great for confidence and personal clarity. So, firstly, good listeners are always respected. It's an act of generosity towards the speaker. And secondly, you're going to feel in control because you'll understand the conversation's finer points. And knowing the finer points means you'll be much more able to construct a coherent and relevant response to whatever the comment is or a question and so forth. Now, how many times have you done that? Had a conversation with somebody and they're cutting you off left and right or whatever. And then they come back with some answer, some long winded answer or reply that has nothing to do with what it is you were trying to say. Nothing. It doesn't address your concern. It doesn't answer your question. It leaves you just like, what? No, that's not what, no, what I said was blah, 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 blah. And then now we're recycling this whole conversation because the person wasn't even listening. That's frustrating. That's really frustrating. So in that though, we have to do some self-analysis, right? And unfortunately, simply improving listening skills cannot heal all communication problems. Now, there's a number of other reasons, such as poor self-confidence. You know, why you find your conversations might prove unsatisfactory. And a good exercise is to sometimes write yourself an open list. Don't show it to anyone, That way you can be completely honest, about what you find uncomfortable about your interactions and the negative feelings that you might experience after you've maybe left a conversation, and keep that list with you. The next time you come out of a conversation feeling unhappy, well, write down what you feel went wrong. All the time remembering the points discussed about listening. This way you will be able to conceptualize some of the issues involved in your own communication problems. Because when you start to address that, well, now you're going to elevate your communication pattern, your formation, your tone, your how clear do you say what it is you're feeling. We have to take responsibility for our words. An unconfident speaker peppers their speech with maybe, but, I'll try, I think, I hope. It serves to kind of muddy your message, and as such works in a vicious circle, reducing confidence, which in turn reduces clarity, which in turn reduces confidence, and it continues. Next time you go into a conversation, make a conscious effort to show commitment to what it is you're saying. What are you proclaiming in this moment? Well, own it. Own it. Believe in your words. Make strong statements. That doesn't mean that, that you're going to seem like bullish, being a bully or anything. It just means that you're happy to stand behind your words as you speak them. If you don't presume to speak for others, for example, saying we think, well, if you're a good listener and prepared to learn from others, then this positivity of speech becomes something that is admired. The other thing is aiming your speech. All communication, in whatever form, it has an aim. There's a goal, right? You speak to be heard, and so cause a reaction in the listener. And knowing why you're entering a conversation, if you initiate it, and what you want your words to convey once you're in it, means that you can focus clearly, keeping all irrelevant details out of the equation. Now, we're guilty a lot sometimes, especially when we get into arguments, get into a heated situation. Well, we're bringing in, we start bringing in details that don't even relate to what topic was brought up. Now we've shifted one topic into 15. Now we're talking about our current. We're talking about last week. We're talking about 2 years ago. We're just bringing in, all these other details that have no bearing. Well, now you've just taken the conversation, number one, off course, but you've also let your brain go off course. And chances are, when your mouth continues to open, you're that person that's conveying the long-winded comment that has nothing to do with what the conversation was to begin with. And as well as this, taking a step back, looking at your intentions before you speak means that you'll be more able to spot negative aims, such as wanting to be hurtful, saying something out of spite and all these things. So it's quite simple. Negative aims create negative conversations, right? So guarding against this can improve your experience of conversation to no end. This is especially useful if you have a habit of just blurting out horrible things when you're mad and in a fury or under pressure. So, in closing this out, let me leave you with this. Communication is never just straightforward. Subtext lie below subtext, below subtext, below subtext, And that's to say, nothing of those thoughts that people leave in their minds. And in many ways, that is what makes life exciting. I mean, after all, we're not robots, right? And ultimately, perfect communication in terms of fully understanding others, it's impossible. That is. But that is not to say that there is no point in trying to be a good communicator. It's quite the opposite. Developing your communication skills means you get nearer and nearer that impossible goal, to understand what it is to be another person, to speak with the conscious effort of understanding what you're speaking and how it's going to be received. When you're going to text, be conscious of what you're texting. Pay attention to what it is. What is your mode and energy and thought process in that mode? If you're raging mad and you're sending a text to somebody, well, chances are, you're going to be wording and saying things in there that maybe you don't want to say, because you might be opening up a whole nother can of worms than what it is of just dealing with that moment right then. Take a breath before you're going to start sending out texts. Think before you speak. Guys, I hope you were able to pull something from this today. The bottom line of this is how we speak is important, and speaking is important. Don't stay silent and then get pissed off because somebody's doing something against how you feel. You didn't say it. If you got a problem with something, you can't get mad because now that problem has come to a bigger point, but you didn't speak up. Nobody knows. You didn't convey anything. We have to speak, and we have to speak clearly, and we have to also speak with some confidence by what we're saying. That will be received. And don't text the important things that should be a phone call or should be a sit down face to face. We can't avoid personal interaction. We want to encourage personal interaction. Don't become you're just a number on my phone. You're a number on my phone and a really long text log, and that's it. That's our communication. That is not good communication, people. Just saying. All right, guys. I hope your week is going fantastic. I hope you have a very blessed rest of your Tuesday and rest of this week. I encourage you to be back with me tomorrow at 11:30. And again, all of the details are getting published right now up to PsychCandy.org for the PsychCandy Empowerment Bootcamp. I encourage you, please go take a look at that. It's going to be really, really special. It's July 29th through the 31st. Seating for that is limited, so please go give that a shout and give that a look. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Be happy, be healthy.